Welcome back to the show. It's Richie McCormack here with you this evening. Now, an article in the Telegraph today claimed that a culture of sexism pervades in Irish rugby, even in the year 2023, and a couple of days out from their third outing in the TikTok Women's Six Nations against Italy in Parma. The author of that article is Fiona Tomas, and she joins us on the line. Fiona, good evening to you.
Hi Richie, how are you doing?
Nice to have you along. I'm always intrigued by the germ of something. And what was the starting point for you, without wanting to have revealed sources, etc., for this particular article?
Yeah, I was asked this question earlier today, actually, on another pod. And to be frank with you, it was really just watching Nicola Friday, the Irish captain, after that loss to France last week in the Women's Six Nations, where I guess your listeners will be familiar with what happened. Ireland went out and they kind of got pummeled by 14-woman France there were 14 women down, I think, for a good hour or so. And just seeing kind of Nicola's reaction after the match, it was so genuine, it was so authentic. You can see she's a very passionate, hardworking female athlete. And she just looked, she was so emotional. And I sort of kind of spotted similarities with the interview that Siwan Lillicrap, the former Welsh captain, gave sort of at this point exactly 2 years ago, before the Welsh Rugby Union rolled out contracts for its side. And it really sort of set something within me. And I thought, well, you know, the sort of lack of support that the Irish Rugby Football Union has given its female athletes over the past, 2 and a bit years, really, with the failure of the team to not qualify for last year's World Cup. It's been well documented, and I just sort of wanted to kind of dig a bit deeper, really, to sort of see what's been going on, really, and how it's come to this, how it has come to the fact that these women are sort of being sent out to fail in a way.
Yeah, it's been an interesting decade, I guess, since Ireland won that Grand Slam in 2013. The rugby team has probably been on a journey that it never wanted to encounter, I guess, and there's been a lot of authors of that particular story, and a lot of them would come from on high, and how the team was cared for or not, as your piece kind of discovers as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you mentioned that team there, that iconic team of 2013 who went out and won that slam. And, you know, those were the sort of glory days, weren't they, for Irish women's rugby? And, you know, all those teams in the Women's Six Nations have been on a journey as such since then. And, you know, over here in England, we've certainly been on a sort of triumphant and heartbreaking journey at the same time, with the Red Roses obviously losing that amazing final to New Zealand in the World Cup last year. What I would say is that, you know, as someone who reports a lot on women's rugby and women's sport, you know, I see the likes of England go out and wallop teams kind of week in, week out. And they have been doing that obviously in this year's Six Nations as well. And I sort of fear what the scoreline will be when they come to Cork in, the week after next. And yeah, it just, you know, it's kind of striking the way that our own union, the Rugby Football Union, has sort of mapped out this kind of path for our women's team over here, compared to the lack of mapping out that the Irish Union has done. You know, we've got the Sugar Babes playing at Twickenham at the end of this month. Nearly 50,000 tickets have nearly been sold for that match at Twickenham. And you look at kind of where, like, the state of the game is in Ireland, with a lot of players having left the country to come over and play their club rugby over here, you know. And you know, the allegations that I kind of uncovered in the Telegraph piece today about, you know, players being denied just simple things like protein supplements, you know, in the build up to their Japan tour last year. And you just think, what? Like, this is crazy.
On that particular issue, the IRFU have pointed out that they have since employed, I think it was the start of February, in around that direction, that they employed Emma Brennan as a full-time nutritionist for the women's 15 side. So you would imagine that issues like that have indeed been rectified.
I would certainly like to think so, Richie. But then, you know, when you hear what you just said there, it's 2023, and only now have they just appointed the squad's first full-time nutritionist. I mean, I wouldn't know how long Ireland men have had a full-time nutritionist for, but I bet it's been longer than February this year. You know, and that's where the kind of sexist attitudes, I think, tend to pervade. It's like, you know, why are we taking this long? These basic things to be put these basic building blocks to be put in place for the women's team, which are automatically kind of given for the men, or have been a given to the men.
Did you, like, I know it's not stipulated in your piece, can you give any indication of whether that player who was denied protein seemingly on that Japan tour, whether they're still involved in the Irish setup?
They're still involved, but I would be reluctant to say any more than that, just because I don't want to get any sort of hassle, to put it mildly.
The contract issue is an interesting one as well, because there were 30 odd contracts offered to players last year. I think 27 took them up, and they ranged from 15,000 to 30,000 in terms of salaries. The issue within the article is that there wasn't a hybrid contract on offer to players who might necessarily be in a position, like 15 to 30 grand isn't going to pay the rent in Dublin. That's quite clear to anybody at the moment. But there wasn't an opportunity for those who might want to tally that with their own outside work for them to pursue that opportunity.
Yeah, and that was one of the kind of really surprising things, I think, that kind of emerged from my kind of journalism, the fact that, you know, this was a specific request, as I understand, you know, among many of the players. We're kind of at a funny junction in women's rugby at the minute, especially if you think about it in Ireland, where, you know, they haven't quite made that full-time switch yet to kind of complete professionalism like we have with England over here. I mean, even at club level over here, there's a lot of talk about, you know, which model which model best suits your kind of elite women's rugby player in this day and age. Is it sort of to go full time, to be that professional athlete, or is it a sort of half and half situation where you kind of have a dual career situation going on? So you're constantly enriching kind of one part of your life through whatever that might be, away from rugby, and then you have your rugby playing side to it. So I think, I know that was a kind of request from the group. And it sort of fell on deaf ears, unfortunately. It was a sort of, no, you've got to be in Dublin or not.
How many were involved in that group that wanted the hybrid contracts, or wanted to at least have that discussion?
I wouldn't be able to put a number on it, Richie, but I understand it to be, obviously, it was well aired, you know, as a sort of, it was raised. And this sort of goes back to the whole point about, things like or any decision that a union takes, you know, it's got to be sort of player led. You know, players at the end of the day have got to be at the heart of the decision making process, because they're the ones who are living and breathing and, you know, playing the rugby. And for example, it's quite concerning that on the whole white shorts debacle, very topical in women's sport at the minute, with, you know, our lionesses over here recently switching their white shorts. You know, to hear that was just a sort of, okay, yeah, let's change the short colour without consulting any of the players. You know, that was, again, it's sort of an example of you know, the sort of apathy, I think, that you know, is sort of being shown towards, you know, women at the minute, you know, these women's players. You know, and I'm not saying, you know, the Irish Union isn't alone in this. You know, it's kind of long kind of plagued other unions, other sporting organisations from, you know, outside of rugby as well. It's a very common thing in women's sport where women aren't listened to. But yeah, that was another big thing.
Take us through that shorts issue, because that's something that popped up, I think, in all of our inboxes a couple of weeks ago, before the Six Nations started, whereby it was announced that the Ireland women's team, I guess in line with a lot of other women's teams across several different sports, had decided that they will be changing short colour from white to a darker colour, and that's obviously to accommodate players who will be playing while on their period. And that's a completely sensible thing, and seems like a completely overdue scenario that they've actually come to deal with. It turns out that there wasn't actually much player involvement in that, and reading back through the press release that came through, it seemed more of a marketing opportunity for the kit supplier than it did seem the outcome of a lengthy, meaningful discussion, I guess. It doesn't even have to be lengthy, with the players. Yeah,
you kind of hit the nail on the head there completely. Like, I must admit, when I first saw the news drop, before, I think it was the same day as the Women's Six Nations launch at the start of March. It was, I missed it. I was surprised because, you know, I was at the Euros last summer, where I asked Beth Mead, our lioness striker, about the white shorts and whether she'd she feels comfortable playing in them. And Beth was very vocal about it and said, well, no, actually, it's quite impractical for the team. 8 months later, the FA announced that the team are going to change to blue. So that was a process that took 8 months. And from what I can see, at no point has as an Irish women's player ever spoken out publicly about feeling anxious or stressed about having to wear white shorts and play in white shorts when they're on their period. Now, being on your period is a very individual thing as a woman. There might be players within that group who think the switch to navy is brilliant, especially if they're heavy bleeders. But I think the fact that, like you said, it sort of just landed that day in everyone's inbox. There was no sort of timeline of events that were mentioned. There was no sort of names of players who'd kind of driven this initiative. And the more I kind of looked into it, the more I got the sense that, this was a decision that was taken above the players. And that for me is, a real red flag, because like I said, these sorts of decisions have to be player-led.
Did you manage to put that point to the IRFU?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and they came back to me on that, and it's reflected in the article. They said that the issue about playing in white shorts apparently was first raised during the Japan tour last autumn,
which is fairly recent. It's not like it's a sudden problem or a sudden issue.
No, yeah, fairly recent. But if you re-listen to Nicola Friday's interview that she gave at the Women's Six Nations launch, where she was asked at length about the shorts, at no point did she mention the Japan tour.
We've obviously heard from Greg McWilliams today. He's been up in front of the media because that's what happens 2 days out from an international. They're playing Italy in Parma in the Six Nations. He was asked if indeed he had read your article today.
I read the article. I think it'd be wrong of me to not read the article, and lots of it's historic. It's the same things that you could have talked about last year. When I met David Nusafora in 2021, I started on the 1st of December. He outlined the plan, and everything that we talked about, we're on track, and that's all we can focus on. I was the only full-time staff member on the 1st of December. We now have 7 full-time staff members. We've 8 contractors that come into us for our competition week. We have 8 new employments along our pathway in our centres of excellence. So there's been a massive growth in that time. And to be honest with you, talking about things historically is we can't control, and we can't control the external noise. We can control what we can do. And it's a good lesson. It's a really good lesson for these young players, not just in rugby, but in life, that if you trust in the process of what you're doing and you've got good people around you, I've been really impressed with their resilience, and I've been impressed with their ability to rise to the challenge of playing Italy. What happened previously, I can't stop people talking about it. And if anything, that's something that, they can talk about all they like. We've got to focus on Italy, and we've got to focus then after Italy, we've got to focus on England, and after England, we've got to focus on Scotland. We have to get better. The Irish public, demand good performances. They've seen that with the men's and the 20 side, and even the under-18s girls sides were phenomenal last weekend. Things are happening here, and as a head coach, I absolutely believe in the plan and the direction we're going in, and so do the players, and that's what's really exciting. This is a challenge for us. It's challenging our growth as a group. It's challenged our ability to stay focused, and the reaction has been superb, and I've been really proud and impressed by how they're dealing with that. And it's an interesting article, but again, it's nearly irrelevant at this stage. We're moving forward, and we've got a great plan, and we've got good resources around us.
Fiona, when he regards the article as being irrelevant and being largely constituted of legacy issues, what's your reaction to what Greg McWilliams says there?
I've got a huge amount of sympathy for Greg McWilliams. I think he's got a very difficult job on his hands, and I wouldn't say any of the stuff that I've uncovered is his fault. I think everyone would acknowledge that. He's just trying to do a job. He's just trying to lead a group of players. And, they are incredibly resilient, like you said. What I would say, though, is that I consider it quite ironic how he's labelled all of those allegations historic when he's just sort of, in that press conference today, announced all the kind of supposed strides that the union has made, in the past 2 years, which are kind of no less historic than the kind of allegations that I've uncovered today, if you get what I'm saying. In terms of all the infrastructure and increased investment that the union has poured into its women's team since he joined as head coach in December 2021, that may very well be the case. But what's coming next? What's the future? What does the next bit of investment look like? Now, they're the questions that I would certainly be asking. And look, I understand he has to front up difficult situations like this and put positive things on put a positive spin on things, I should say. That's his job. But yeah, I would question, what is the future of this team? Where is it going? Because I think a lot of people want to know.
You point out, obviously, and it's something that struck me when the first set of teams came in across the Six Nations weekend, the paucity of caps that are down throughout the team. Like, I think the first team selection against Wales, there was only, and this is top of my head, 3 players who had 20 caps or more, and I think it might have gone up to 4 in the next game. So it shows you where the players are at. You mentioned the phrase earlier on in today that they're being sent out to fail at the moment, and there seems to be not a suggestion, but there seems to be a sense that until these changes and professionalism, even if it's on a very base level, do have a chance to take root, that this is just going to be the lot of the Ireland rugby team for the next while, next year or two at least, and possibly even longer. Yeah,
but I mean, that's the sort of a possibility, I guess, isn't it? If the situation doesn't change anytime soon. I just, I'm currently sat in the WRU Centre of Excellence, and they're playing at a sold-out Cardiff Arms Park on Saturday. Why is that? Because they've won their opening 2 games in the bounce. They've been professional for the past 15 months. I think people have to wake up to the fact that women, we're 50% of the world's population. You need to start investing in women, and if you invest in female athletes, they almost certainly deliver. And, those Irish girls will deliver. They just need a bit of love and support at the minute because they're not getting enough. And, like I said, I bring the situation back to over here with England because the RFU, they're doing something right if they can get 50,000 to Twickenham. And like I said, these girls, these women are passionate, hardworking female athletes. They're young, like you say, but, that there's so much potential in there. And I just feel that the longer we kind of keep having these conversations about, things that aren't right and women being denied protein and silly things that could so easily be ironed out, we could be talking about so much more positive stuff. And, sorry, I'm just a bit tired.
It's understandable. Listen, the WRU is actually a really good example because that's shown what is possible in quite a quick turnaround, because they obviously would have entered into professionalism themselves and offering contracts, and similarly there's an avenue for players to go and play in the Premier 15s as well. So it shows particularly what is capable, not even in getting the numbers into the Cardiff Arms Park, but having the team be competitive in a short space of time, that it will take a year or two, but it can be achievable.
Exactly. And you mentioned that key word there, competitive, because that's what we're not seeing yet in the Women's Six Nations. England and France, in recent years, they've really ruled the roost. England more so, because they've won it four times on the bounce. And don't get me wrong, I'm at Cardiff Arms Park on Saturday for Wales, England, and England are expected to still win because they've been professional for longer. However, I would expect this Welsh team to, front up more so than they have in recent years, and they deserve to, because they've had that investment, they've had the contracts, they've got a full-time squad now, and yeah, I think England will win on Saturday, but the gap is closing, and it's all about closing that gap.
Yeah, John Cronin as well was one of the few people to go on the record with you as well. He is the director of rugby at Railway Union. Were you surprised that so few people seem to be willing to speak out about the issues that still surround Irish rugby here?
Not really, to be honest, because we know, sadly, what happens when women speak out in women's sport. women are taught to always be eternally grateful for, you know, the crumbs off the table and for what contracts they have, even if it's living off €15,000 in Dublin. I do wonder, though, whether, you know, at what point we might see a bit of a watershed moment in women's rugby, especially in Irish women's rugby, whereby in women's football you've seen the likes of Ada Hedeberg, you know, boycott the Norwegian football team for years because she did not believe in what the Norwegian FA were doing. Now she's back in the squad because the Norwegian FA have got their act together, and she's happy with the level of support that the women are now.
We had our own line in the sand moment here with the international soccer team, whereby they weren't happy with the, you know, surroundings of the team and how they were being treated at the time, and there are certainly things that progressed to the point that they qualified for a World Cup, and their profile in terms of like you mentioned, they're getting bodies in the door to actually watch the team has never been higher. I'm conscious of what Greg McWilliams also had to say. He was asked directly today if he believed the IRFU was a sexist organisation.
No, of course not. I met up with David Nusafora in 2021, and he outlined what his plan was. I outlined the way I felt that it needed to go. And if you look at the staff that we have around us, you know, I was able to have a big influence in getting the right people around this group, brilliant professionals who care about turning Irish rugby into something that's going to be special. And yes, we're going through tough times, but I think that's part of why I'm enjoying it so much. Is one thing I've been a sucker for, you know, working with teams. I've always been on the back foot a little bit, right down to when I was in school, and I took up a role with a senior cup team in Michaels. They'd never won a cup before. That really appealed me it was really appealing to try and to be with the group that did it for the first time. Same with the Irish women's side. I was with them first. They had nothing. They were losing matches by massive score lines. And I wanted to be a part of that because I wanted to help them. You know, that's whether I was a school teacher or whether I was a rugby coach, Sarah, is like, I just want to help people get better and achieve their true inner happiness and give them the confidence and the tools they can take with them, not just in rugby, but outside of rugby. That's always been what I'm about. That's why I'm a rugby coach, is I love being around people and seeing them grow and develop. And, you know, part of that development is seeing them going through tough times and being upset. You know, there's a lot of upset faces last Saturday, week ago against France, not just Nicola. She happened to be the one who's being interviewed. But we have to own our performance. We have to get better. That's all that matters.
That all that matters to you, Fiona? Getting better?
That, I guess, and, you know, wanting the union, I guess, to pour more investment into its women's team. How are you going to get better without that?
What's an adequate level of investment as regards what you'd see? Because I know that there are disparities between, I think when the English model went live in terms of pro contracts, the average is 35,000, and obviously here is between 15 and 30. So there is a bit of a disparity there in terms of the sheer numbers involved and the finances.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily kind of just put it all on money and how much things cost and how much salaries are worth, because, you know, I mean, women don't play rugby for the money anyway, do they? You know, that they play it because, you know, they love it and they have that humble attitude, don't they? I mean, I guess I'm a realist when it comes to women's sport. You know, of course, women don't generate as much money as the men do. You know, I don't know what the crowd numbers are or have been in at home for Ireland, or how many turned up to the France game. But, you know, that sort of revenue is not the team is not commercially viable yet. A lot of women's rugby teams aren't commercially viable yet. But this is, you know, a long-term investment plan, and that's what the Irish Union has to recognise. That's what the RFU has recognised, and that's why it's on track to sell out Twickenham in 2 years' time. Sorry, I've forgotten your main question now, Richie.
I was just in terms of the investment that needs to happen, both in terms of intent and with finances.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess finances aside, it's kind of looking at the organisation as a whole, because I know John Cronin in my piece talked very much about, you know, the archaic governance structure that exists in Irish rugby. And I must admit, my brain was sort of frazzled kind of listening to what he had to say about, you know, how how this and that operates, you know, in Irish rugby in Ireland, I kind of sense that it was extremely different to how we kind of run things over here, in terms of the provinces and stuff. I mean, you look at, I know in my piece that the union was likened to an old boys club. And I did see on social media, which made me laugh earlier today, a recent photo of the Irish committee, basically, you know, being rows and rows of, you know, old white men, essentially. And I'm sure they're all lovely people. But, you know, my question would be, where are the women? And not just women who are like token women being put in those positions, who are, you know, compliant and would do whatever is asked for them. Women who are actually involved in rugby. You know, you need women to sit around that decision making table in order to influence change. You need to be in the room to influence change. And everyone's waiting for this change, you know, in Irish rugby. And it's sad, isn't it? I think we're going to just continue having these conversations, and these silly instances of, you know, the players not even being given protein supplements when they ask for it will keep on bubbling up and bubbling over. And so maybe one day we do have like a watershed moment, like the Irish women's football team had in, you know, a decade or so ago. And like you said, look where they are now. And do you know what? I kind of hope that happens, because it takes one person to speak out for that domino effect to happen. And then, you know, change comes. So, you know, let's sit tight and maybe it might happen.
Fiona Tomas, I know it's been a mental day for you today in response to this article as well, so I'll let you go, and thanks so much for taking time out to speak to us this evening.
No worries, thanks very much.
Cheers, take care.